Hey everybody, King's Drummer here, and in this video I want to talk about something I just downloaded off the internet. And in fact, it's playing right here. There's this documentary series called Classic Albums, and as you can see on Classic Albums, they're featuring So by Peter Gabriel. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Classic Albums documentary series, what they are is a series of documentaries of, records that sold a lot of copies and are now considered classics, and they interview the artists that wrote the music, the producers that produced the album, some of the engineers and everyone else involved, and get them to look back and all the stories that they remember writing and recording the music and getting together the album artwork. Anything they can remember during that whole experience of creating that album, they relive it. And it's a great album series. It's great if you're into documentaries and how albums are made. If you're interested in that sort of thing, it's fantastic. And I've been watching it forever. And I got a few, just to give you an example of what they do. Classic album series that featured Phil Collins for Face Value, and so it's a documentary talking to Phil Collins, how he wrote all the songs, how he wrote In the Air Tonight, how he pieced it together, instrument by instrument. He even sits with his producer Hugh Padgham, and they bring up all the multi-tracks and hear isolated instruments, how it relates to the song. This is fantastic. And they even did one on Fleetwood Mac Rumors, which is my favorite one, because not only do they talk about the music that was written, and you can hear all the isolated harmonies, vocals, guitars, drums, blah blah blah, but you can hear what was going on with the band emotionally at the time. Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks were breaking up. John and Christy McVie were breaking up, and they were all just whacked out of their minds on cocaine. So the documentaries get very in depth, and I'll let it play on. That's Laurie Anderson. So I'll let it play on while I talk about it. So it's the making of Peter Gabriel's So, and this is the album if you're not familiar with it. Peter Gabriel, So. The only album of his, the first album of his actually to actually have a title. Before his albums were never titled, and in the documentary he goes about why he started off his albums that way with no title. Peter Gabriel, being a big fan of vinyl himself, he says he was in love with album covers, and to him they were pieces of art. If you can get a real striking, interesting looking photo, why would you cover it up with a bunch of text to make it look like advertising, he said. So he always thought, that's why he never put a title in any of his first 3 records or 4 records, so you can focus more on the picture of the album cover. So I always found that fascinating. So this documentary, which is now just getting started, as you can see, well, I don't know if you can see that, but that's the producer of Daniel Lanois, I believe his name is. He worked with U2 as well on the Joshua Tree. There's Peter Gabriel. It does go on the story of how he wrote the album, how he recorded the album, and the experience of it all, even to the point where he had decided that he wasn't going to record it in a proper recording studio or state-of-the-art recording studio. He just rented a country house with a cow barn and just converted the house into a recording studio and just filled it with musical recording equipment, and basically recorded, I think, partially in the cow barn and in the house. And instead of going to the studio where you're on a schedule because time is money, he's in his own place and he can take his time. And Peter Gabriel has a habit of working very, very, very slowly, and it's really documented in this video documentary. Pretty cool. Anyway, what I found interesting is they talk about the song Red Rain, which is being featured right now on the screen from this album. Red Rain, which is interesting about that song and a lot of Peter Gabriel's past records and current records, is how he records drums. The song, for example, Red Rain, has so many different things in the percussion world going on in it, as far as hand percussion, drum set playing, and it's not all standard just boom, tsh, boom, tsh. I mean, it's a collaboration of different performances from his drummer at the time, and I guess they were getting the best takes, and they weren't just standard 4/4 beats, even though he was playing 4/4 time. It's almost like he's finding a different way to express himself as a drummer, but yet still keep time. It's pretty interesting, and how he layers his drummer's best performances and gets him to think outside the box. And that's really what's interesting about listening to Peter Gabriel records, is that's how the percussion and the drums are recorded and arranged on his albums. And in fact, there's his drummer there, Jerry Barota, I believe his name. Not that familiar with him, but he was a drummer on the song Red Rain, and they didn't really isolate much of the drum tracks. They didn't really focus on it too much, but I remember listening to it thinking, God, there's all kinds of things going on in the drums. It's not just a straight drummer playing it in one go. I mean, there's layers and layers of things happening there in that song, as well as the bass accenting everything. It's just amazing how he puts drum parts together in multiple layers. And the interesting about Peter Gabriel, I'll keep showing it, is before he was a singer, in his very, very early years, before he was a singer, he was a drummer. And so he has a fascination with the drums, even though he's, per se, not a professional drummer. He's still a drummer at heart. And when it comes to his albums, the drums get a big focus. And according to this documentary, a lot of the songs start with the drums first, and they sort of build on top of the recorded drum tracks to give the song its personality. So that was really great. The song Sledgehammer, and they talk about in this documentary, they say it was almost written last minute. It was like, according to them, it was one of the last songs on the sessions. They thought, the studio musicians and everyone involved in this project thought they were done, and they were going to, let's see if I could turn this around so you can see it a little better. Hopefully that helps. Where was I at now? Okay, they thought the whole album was recorded. They had enough songs to put on an album. Peter Gabriel had an idea for a song that was a tribute to R&B, because believe it or not, Peter Gabriel admits in this documentary he's a big fan of R&B music. He likes R&B and soul music. So he had Tony Levin come and design this bass line, and Tony Levin demonstrates it in this documentary, and it sounds killer. And they get a drummer by the name of Manu. I can't say his name right, but it's Manu Ketchi, I believe is his name. Great drummer. Worked with Peter Gabriel, worked with Sting. The guy's a great talent. And they brought him in just for that song, and then later he worked on In Your Eyes, I believe. And they wanted him because he wasn't just one of these solid guys that just played blasting away. They wanted him to have the ability to give it some kind of swing, so somewhat of a shuffle sound to it. And then they isolated his drums in this documentary when they get on the sound, when they get on the recording module like that, and they just isolate the drums, what he did in that drum performance, and they slowly bring in the bass, and you can see how it all comes together. I really love how they showed that. And of course they went to Memphis for the horn section. The Memphis Horns is what they were called, and they had I guess the horn section leader. They interviewed him, and they asked, and he gave his thoughts on how they put the horn section together and those parts. They wanted something to just build and build and build and build, and they say the song Sledgehammer came together really quickly. And Peter Gabriel, as I said earlier, was not known for an artist that can write things quickly. They dove into the song Don't Give Up, which is a duet with Kate Bush. And what I found interesting about that was Kate Bush wasn't Peter Gabriel's original choice as a female singer for that song Don't Give Up. He says the song was based on some photographs a photographer took of the Great Depression in 1929. And it was basically about a man and a woman who I guess were married, and And the man, I guess, had lost his job, and there was no money coming into the family, and they were hit with really hard times. Homelessness, starving, can't put clothes on their back, and it was based on these actual photographs during the Great Depression era. And so I think he was thinking country vocals as a choice for duet. And his original idea for a duet partner was Dolly Parton. And I sit there and think about it, like, I can't imagine Dolly Parton's voice for the song Don't Give Up, because I'm so used to hearing it with Kate Bush. But originally they had Dolly Parton in mind to do the duet with Peter Gabriel. But Dolly Parton and her management were, number one, they never heard of Peter Gabriel at the time, and they just flat out weren't interested. So the second choice was Kate Bush, and well, we all heard the song. It's a great song, and they used a different bass player, I believe, on that one. It wasn't Tony Levin, and he demonstrated how he came up with the line, and that was pretty interesting how he came up with the line. It was I don't want to say it was layered, but it was a combination of things, and it was fantastic. Okay, now the song In Your Eyes. There's the producer, Daniel Lanois. He said that the song In Your Eyes, putting it together, took a lot out of him. They had so many different versions of In Your Eyes when they were writing it and recording it. So many different versions, and the one thing was the drums. They had tons of drum set playing, tons of hand percussion, African percussion, stuff they programmed on drum machine, all kinds of bits. And and in their control room, they made this huge chart that took up the whole size of a wall, and they were charting every bit of musical instrument that was recorded, and where it would come in the song that they were building it. And so that was their checklist, their track list, really, of what they had recorded. And they were slowly building the song together on audio tape, a 2-inch audio tape, I think is what they said. This is before digital recording, I believe. And so they had to piece that thing together with all these different bits that they recorded. And it was so interesting to hear how they put together In Your Eyes. It's just absolutely interesting. I mean, I think I'm doing a terrible job describing how in-depth this documentary was, and I still feel like they could have explained more, but it was great. They went into Mercy Street as well, how that song was put together. Mostly they went into, it started off with a programmed drum pattern for toms, and Peter Gabriel said he deliberately altered the pitch of each tom to have this pattern, and they recorded it and looped it and then presented it to Tony Levin, the bass player, and it says, we want you to mimic what you hear in this drum pattern. And so Tony Levin grabbed a fretless bass and just sort of mimicked this programmed tom-tom pattern with all this strange pitch adjustments, and before you know it, you heard the foundation of the song. This tom pattern, Tony Levin's bass, and then they were off. And then the biggest thing that this documentary shows was how they were going to layer the vocal harmonies for Peter Gabriel. I mean, it showed this 3-part harmony he was singing. And they said that was that was done really slow, and everyone had to be patient with Peter Gabriel because he's not exactly the fastest worker. And they said the low harmony was so low, it was hard for Peter with his voice to hit those notes so low. And so the producer came up with a great idea. He had Peter Gabriel spend the night at the studio, and while Peter Gabriel was sleeping, they were prepping the studio to get ready for him. As soon as he woke up, he went straight into the studio with that morning voice we all have before you drink a cup of coffee or that, and he sang with that voice, and he was able to get that low harmony because he was singing with his just woke up voice. That we all have it. We all have it when we first wake up. Our voices are actually the octave is pretty low. And as we wake up and drink something, you know, we go back up to our normal voice. Well, he's sang in his morning voice. That's how he was able to get the low harmonies, which I found interesting. I thought that was pretty cool. And it just made me want to just dive into this record a lot more. After I was done watching the documentary, I gave the record a spin, and it was like I was hearing it with a different set of ears. It was just wild, just wild. I mean, I always thought Peter Gabriel wrote some great albums and some great music. Out of everybody in the Genesis family, they went out and put out solo records like him, Phil Collins, Tony Banks, Rutherford, Steve Hackett. Even though I love Phil Collins and his records mean so much to me, I have to admit Peter Gabriel writes better music out of all the Genesis solo stars. He is my favorite, and this album is one of my favorites from him. And so watching this documentary was so interesting to me. I could tell I'm going to watch this documentary a bunch of times and always get something different from it. It just made me realize how much of an amazing artist Peter Gabriel is, even though he takes forever to write an album. He makes Peter Gabriel records. I mean, I can't think of anyone he sounds like, and I can't think, it's like Alfred Hitchcock only makes Alfred Hitchcock films, that sort of thing. Peter Gabriel only makes Peter Gabriel records, so it's so unique. And as a drummer, how he puts the drum parts together is unorthodox from any other CD or album I hear, because the drums are arranged in such a different way that I'm just not used to hearing. There's unorthodox sounds. They're tom-tom patterns. There's no straight beat like a hi-hat. I mean, even in this documentary, Peter Gabriel says he's not a big fan of recording a hi-hat and cymbal crashes. Daniel Lanois had to make a big stand on this album to put some hi-hat on it. And I think at first, Peter Gabriel didn't want to, and he finally buckled and gave in. And so they would say, finally, we have a Peter Gabriel album with hi-hat. And I thought about it, I was like, yeah, they're right. There's not much hi-hat and cymbal in his records. But anyway, if you don't have this album, but I think a lot of people in the VC do yourself a favor and buy it and give it a listen. You'll be amazed at how amazing the music is, and there's so much information going on in his records. It's hard to catch everything on the first listen. You have to listen to it multiple times. And this is what I find interesting about his music and Genesis music, is when you listen to it for the first time, you don't quite get it. You may like it, but you're not sure about certain songs or certain parts of songs. When it comes to Genesis and Peter Gabriel records, you have to invest your time. I mean, when you dive into his records, you have to make a time investment, because you're not going to get the whole story the first listen. It takes multiple listens to get his music. At least for me it was. Maybe people are different, but for me that was the case. I had to listen to this multiple times to get everything that was on here. And that's what I found interesting about his records. That's what I find interesting about Genesis records too. How when you listen to it the first time, you're not quite sure if you like it. But after multiple listens, suddenly you can't get the song out of your head, and it's like the coolest, most amazing thing you've ever heard. So I mean, that's what I get out of his records and Genesis. They both have that effect on me. And this is a wonderful documentary. I had to download it from the internet. I don't know if it's going to be available for sale like these were. I imagine they would be with extras. This is just what aired on BBC television, I guess, recently. And it was funny, that's Daniel Lanois right there. When I first saw this, I didn't recognize him. He looked so different in this. And I was like, whoa, that's the guy that worked on U2, the Joshua Tree. I was like, unbelievable. It doesn't look like him, but it is him. So anyway, it's a fascinating documentary. Download it off the internet like I had to watch it. And if it eventually comes out in stores on DVD, but of course buy it then, because there's probably some cool extras on it. Anyway, that's the video. That's it for this video. I saw this documentary and got so inspired. I wanted to talk about it, so here I am. Anyway, hope everyone's doing well, and I'll see you guys in the next video.